Hey, everybody. Welcome to the podcast. And my guest this week is Steve Mandell, who is the CEO of a fantastic online cookie company called Incredible Cookies, but has had a long and really amazing career as a serial entrepreneur. He started multiple businesses, and one of the businesses he's probably most famous for is the founding and actually category creation of a company called Party City, which for many of us of a certain age was a hugely important part of our social lives as we were becoming parents and growing up and so forth. So welcome, Steve.
Thank you.
What a pleasure to be actually interacting with you. So I thought, for starters, maybe give us some insight into how you got going, what led you to the idea of creating Party City. I think that would be a great sort of insight for a lot of our listeners.
Sure. So I had been an independent manufacturer sales rep for a decent amount of years, and one of the lines that I represented was a party goods line, and but I didn't represent the party goods line to the party goods trade. I represented it to the mass merchandiser trade. And it was apparent to me that, in Jersey, where I was located, that there were some incredible independent stores in New Jersey. I did not think it was a chain concept, a Target or Walmart, because to me, it was all about variety, and the big box retailers aren't going to devote the space, the breadth of merchandise that they needed to. So I said, you know what? I'm tired of being a manufacturer sales rep for 13 years, being dependent upon other people, being manufacturers. Manufacturers could go out of business. I lost the line, can't replace the income very quickly. So having grown up as a retailer, I said, you know what? I think there's an opportunity in the party goods industry. And that's basically how Party City was born. I really had a dream. And the dream was to have one good party goods store and be my own person, not have to be dependent upon anybody else for my living. And that's how Party City happened. And sometimes, not having any plan at all, except having one store, things kind of happen. And this was a perfect example of, because to this day, I can kind of pinch myself and say, how did that happen, But
you started off really young, right? Selling candy and selling other things before you started becoming a man.
The truth of the matter, let it be told, that I started off at 10 years old on the street corners of Brooklyn, selling things to people on the street. So I did. 10 years old is pretty young.
I love that. And I work with a lot of entrepreneurs. The people that I really gravitate toward. So there are people like you, we call them habitual entrepreneurs, people that start multiple businesses. And one of the things that I think we get wrong a lot about the whole entrepreneurial experience is, somebody starts a business, it's very successful, and you never know if it was luck or if it was just,
right.
But when somebody's managed to start multiple businesses, and I know your current one, Incredible Cookies, is really, really fun. I think the website is amazing. It's great. But there's something about the insight and the grit that it takes to start multiple businesses that I think is really, really interesting. So you have this idea for the store. One of the things I was really intrigued by was your vision for the store was that it would be fun, that there would be incredible selection, that everything would be in stock. And it reminds me a lot of, people like Ingvar Kamprad, who started IKEA, right? And what was said about him was, retail is detail. He knew every item, every article in that store, right down to the SKU, and you better know it too if you're running a store.
Sure.
And you struck me as that kind of guy.
For sure. I used to drive people crazy going into it. If I walked into a store and I saw one item out of stock, I'd want to figure out, how did that happen? Okay, because you weren't not supposed to be out of stock of anything. So so it's all about detail and kind of being relentless to kind of plug away and and stay focused. And apparently it works.
Mm-hmm. So you had this idea for the perfect store, and it was kind of the perfect time. So it was just to put it in context, it was 86, I believe, right? When you started.
Yep. Mm-hmm. Yep.
So we're in the middle of the 80s. We've got all these baby boomer parents, two working parents, right? And what you did, among many other things, was I think you were really instrumental in creating that ethos around it can't just be a birthday party, a couple of cupcakes and whatnot. It can't just be. It like birthdays became a thing. Like when I was raising my kids, which would have been, so my son was born in 88, so it would have been right around that time. There was this just wave of, hey, if you were a good parent, yes, you worked and yes, you had all these stresses, but when it came time to party, you created this magical environment for your kids. Yep. And I remember going to party, and that was my go-to. Absolutely. And what led you to the multiple decisions to create that kind of magical environment? Like, what did you do? A lot of interviews, focus groups? Was it your own instinct? How did you get the idea of creating this magical space? Because it really was.
I think part of it, once I was in it, and I kind of lived in the store, listening to what customers are asking for and hearing what customers are saying. If you listen to the customer and kind of cater to her needs, it just kind of takes its own direction. And that, as well as going into other operations and seeing what they're all about, whether it be in the party goods business, which was strictly at the time an independent party goods industry, or going into the chain stores during Halloween and seeing how they're presenting costumes and seeing what they're doing, at least what I thought they were doing wrong, and trying to take it to the next level to learn from their mistakes, at least what I felt their mistakes were. It allowed us to do different things. And I mean, the costume business is just one example of it. I don't even, first of all, the location I took in East Hanover was way too small. But what did I know? I didn't even know what the right size of the business should be, right? And we opened it up. And of course, Halloween time, my first Halloween time, it was, I don't want to say it wasn't fun, because it was sort of fun, but I really recognized the store wasn't big enough. The shopping experience had its problems, but I got lucky. How did I get lucky? Because when I took my first location, they had 5,200 square feet available. I said, I don't need all that. I'm going to take 3,900 square feet. And sure enough, after the first Halloween, I called the landlord up. I said, that space in the back that you're using for storage, maybe I could take it if you give it to me at the right price. Anyhow, out of that, something was born called the Halloween Costume Warehouse. And in the second year, it was a whole different look and feel. I mean, it looked great. And I also said to myself that I was going to cut up pictures of costumes, what they look like, rather than having a person have to go through and, because you go into a chain store, it's a mess Halloween time. There's stuff thrown all about. And so we developed what eventually became a Halloween picture wall. And it had, have you ever shopped in Party City?
Absolutely.
I don't know, for some reason, if any parent that has ever shopped in our stores Halloween time, they loved the picture wall. It was about 50 feet of space. It showed every costume. It was clean. It was very easy. And we developed that. Now, I will also tell you that the largest costume manufacturer in the world told me, because that's not how anybody sold costumes, told me I was crazy. And after admitting to them that I was crazy and that it would work, it did work. And up until the end, I happened to be in a Party City store, which I didn't frequent very much at the last 20 some odd years. And I was speaking to a manager, and we were talking about the picture wall. She says, yeah, they did away with it three years ago, and people are still asking for it. And that's just an example of not listening to what the customer is looking for. So anyhow, it just kind of developed, I believe, in listening to the customer. And I do that to this day in my present business, Incredible Cookies. I love calling customers and speaking to them and getting the reaction of not what they, as much as what they liked, but what we could do better, what they didn't like. So, I love that speaking to the customer attitude.
Oh, I think that's amazing. And you do that so naturally, which is amazing. So, to be personal about it, I love the costume wall because, if you think about it, back in those days, I mean, so I worked, my husband worked, we had little ones, and you don't have a huge amount of time, right? And, Halloween is coming and it's really important and everything's got to be perfect. And you go to the picture wall and you bring your kids, right? And instead of messing around with whatever other alternative might be, it never even, now that you're telling me this, it never even occurred to me I would buy Halloween costumes any other way. I didn't realize that was an actual deliberate decision and a departure from what they did in the industry. That's so interesting. Yeah, one of my favorite Halloweens was our son was determined to be a fireman, and he would have been about 4 or 5, let's say, and our daughter, who was really too little at that time to make up her mind for herself, and we were kind of looking, we said, we can't just leave her out, right? So we ended up finding a Dalmatian costume for her. So he got to be a fireman, and she got to be the Dalmatian.
Cute.
It was really cute. So, okay, so you have this one store. It's going well. Life is good. That was the extent of your ambition. And then what happened next?
Well, I was kind of loving life because out of that one store, I was making more money than I really ever expected to make. And one day, as I'm in the store, sometime around 12 noon, I see this guy walking around, and he's not walking around like a customer. He's looking up high up in the top levels of the shelves. And I walked over to him and said, "Can I help you?" And anyhow, to make a long story short, he was looking at a small franchising company. They touted him on opening up a store in the next town from me. He had no idea about the area. He did what I think was a sensible thing. Back then, there was something called the Yellow Pages. He went and did a search on party supply stores, and the next thing he's in my store and looking at it, and he spoke to me, and he asked me if he liked what he saw, much better than what he was looking at maybe doing. And he asked me if I'd consider franchising. Well, that was about as far from my mind as you can possibly imagine. But somebody wants to give me money for something I didn't even know if it was any good or not, from an expansion. Sure, I'll do it. And I kind of franchised in the gray area because the franchise laws, if you didn't take X amount of money for the first 6 months, you didn't need to do all the legal documentation. And sure enough, it happened. He opened up the store in Hazlet, New Jersey, and we all were betting on how much volume it would do. It did 3 times the amount that we thought it would do the first day, and that put me into the franchising business. And what happened, and at the same concurrently, I decided, I'm not comfortable just having one store of my own because. I'm a pessimist in some ways, and God forbid the store catches on fire, I'll be out of business. I have to open up a second store. And so as I opened up the second store, all of a sudden, realtors start saying, well, what is this company? In Jersey, there's 3 locations happening, and they all start calling me about other locations. And then in the meantime, an acquaintance asked me if I wanted to franchise to him. And before I knew it, it was happening by mistake as far as, I was franchising because how can I say no? But I did say no because one of my early on franchisees said I have a friend in Asheville, North Carolina, and he was interested in franchising. I said, you know what? I really don't want to get involved. I'm in New York, New Jersey, maybe Pennsylvania is okay, but I'm not going down to Nashville. And so I did a deal with him that he would use our name and everything about what we stand for. But besides picking out a location, I was not going down. And I gave him a deal. And so all of a sudden, this is not so bad. You're basically operating outside of the New York metropolitan market. And that kind of put me in the track. And I changed my mind very quickly when I started to get some phone calls from people around the country saying, I want a franchise. So I wish I could say I was so smart and such a genius and everything. But, sometimes things happen by mistake, and they just happen. And I think in our case, it happened because we had a good model. It looked good. It felt right. And that's what attracted attention. And we just got off and running. And over the years, every step, I think I have the temperament and personality that I don't like living in the present. Like I'll never forget, we had an incredible Halloween one year. And on October 31st, rather than going out and celebrating, okay, I'm thinking about, well, what are we going to do for an Encore next year? And that's basically, I think, my mentality and the mentality of lots of entrepreneurs, of looking forward and saying, well, what can we do better? And we started to push the envelope until one day there was a small competitor that was not doing well, and they actually wound up hooking up with one of the original merchant from Toys R Us, and they were going to open up and go public. I didn't know what the word public meant, at that stage of my life. And before I knew it, my attorney was talking me into, well, why don't you do some mezzanine financing and then go public? And so, okay. So, like I said, things happen by mistake. And I'll actually, it's kind of an interesting story, is that we were looking to raise $5 million. And I was telling one of my prospective franchisees who came to speak to me about opening up some franchise stores, I said, we're really not going to, our few plans is not to open up franchise stores, but to open up company stores. And I'm looking to raise $5 million. Well, sure enough, I get a phone call from a person, and he said, I'd be very much interested in talking to you about taking this $5 million deal. I had no idea who he was. It turns out that he was Sid Craig of Jenny and Sid Craig of the weight loss centers. And that was his son-in-law that I was speaking to, that I told him I'm looking to raise some capital. I said, you know what? I'm really not looking to take $5 million from one person. I don't mind taking, $1 million from 5 different people. Anyhow, I kind of passed. Sure enough, about 2 months later, he asked me where we were in our roadshow. I said, well, we're just getting ready to go out and pitch what we're doing. And he says, well, why don't you come out to us in California and talk to us? And sure enough, I call my attorney. It's funny how you remember certain things in life. We were probably the last flight out of Newark that day because it was a major snowstorm, and we flew into San Diego and had somebody pick us up at the airport. Went to his beach home. I didn't know it was his beach home. I thought that was his home, but it only got better from there. And the first thing I saw when I walked in, I saw a Kentucky Derby winner on his wall. And I found out that he had bought these stables out in San Diego. It had 100 horses at him, and he had a Kentucky Derby winner himself. And so to make a long story short, we wound up taking, I don't want to take $5 million from him, but he did want to give us $5 million. We took $2.5 million from him, and my attorney wound up with that in our pocket. He wound up going to a bank that he had a relationship with, my attorney had a relationship with, and we got the other $2.5 million from the bank, no personal signatures, and we got our $5 million, and that sent us on the track of opening up, because we were primarily franchise stores at the time, although I had a couple of early stores myself. That set us on the track of having company-owned stores, and the unit economics was so good that it just made sense not to franchise, but to open up our own stores. And the payback was in 1.5 years or so. It was amazing. And so things happen along the road.
So there was this incredible growth, throughout the 90s, where, Party City really created a category. I mean, it was one of those iconic places that, you didn't even think about going anywhere else, right? If you were planning a party, first of all, everything was there. You could do everything. And of course,
and not to interrupt, but it wasn't just the store, but it was about the vendor community that really recognized Amscam, which ultimately wound up buying Party City. But Amscam was an amazing company that really developed product, because you can't have a big store without having the right product to put into it. And they had a person, his name was Jerry Rittenberg, and Jerry was the CEO of Amscam. Subsequently, years after I left, he became the CEO of Party City. But it was because the industry made a great line and great product available that really allowed us to grow the business. And so we had a great partner. The great partner was a couple of great vendors.
So impressive. So you're sort of riding this wave of growth. Did you give a lot of thought to explicitly, to culture, to people? I mean, one of the things I remember is Party City was often where high school kids would work, and they'd have they'd put the uniforms on, and they'd have stuff in the store, and they'd help you to your car with the balloons, and it was just kind of a really fun vibe. Did you give a lot of conscious thought to that?
Yeah. So to me, any business is all about culture, and it's all about starts at the top and kind of goes down. And I was just telling this story to somebody. I'm going to say 6 weeks ago, and I've told this story for years and years and years about training people. And I talk about, I had a young high school part-timer, and he was not so good on his first couple of days. And I turned around to him, and I said, I want you to watch Sam. I want you to see how Sam works. I don't want you to do anything. Just observe Sam. And I said to Sam, look, Sam, you're really good at what you do. I want you to take Joe, whatever his name was, Joe, and I want Joe to watch you about how good you are. So Joe, who was terrible, became a superstar. Oh. And the craziest thing, and I do mean the craziest thing, is that I get a LinkedIn email and I actually forgot what this fellow's name was, although his name was really Stephen. But I get a LinkedIn email talking about his days at Party City. Should send it to you. His days at Party City, and how much it really mapped out the rest of his life some 30 some odd years later, because of some of the things he learned. So I just love that, absolutely loved it. The other thing that was really, I think, part of the culture of the company was the type of people that we hired. And I've always said my best asset was the people that I hired. And everybody can say that, but I believe we lived it. And how did we live it? I got lucky. Lucky is one of the ingredients of being successful. And I was approached by a psychologist. I'm going to say my best guess, sometime back in 1993. And he said to me, give me your best 3 store managers, and let's see if they have any common characteristics. And sure enough, I did. They tested. One wasn't, I'm going to say, the most intelligent person in the world, but what they all possessed is 3 similar characteristics. What were they? High energy level, the ability to juggle a lot of balls at one time, and they all saw things through to the end. And that became my mantra as far as moving forward and hiring store managers. We tested every one with an outside 3-hour test. It gave us 10 intellectual factors that we looked at, and 10 psychological factors. Because the reality is, when you interview a person, you really can't look what's under the hood and what they're really all about, because it's hard for anybody to look into the mirror and really best know who they are and what their strengths and weaknesses are, right? And it's probably the single biggest thing that to me this day, I keep on scratching my head and say, why doesn't every company use somewhat of an elaborate testing, not a 10-minute, personality test, but there's so much more. And it really, and probably one of the biggest reasons why we never had turnover, or had the turnover we had was so insignificant, because it was the right match. We knew a person's strengths and weaknesses before they started working. And that was it. When I talk about it, I get a little crazy because I just don't get why everybody won't do the same thing. And I probably spent over the years about $500,000 in just testing candidates. And the other thing that just kind of reinforces that, I think I'm a pretty easy guy to work for, right? Maybe not really, but I guess I am, because I don't have a lot of turnover. And I was looking for, this goes back lots of years ago, I was looking for an admin. I actually went through, it was either 10 admins in 11 months or 11 admins in 10 months. So one could say, what, are you crazy? So I said, well, here's the problem. I used to ask people in an interview, on a scale of 1 to 10, how good is your memory? Because when you're building a fast-paced retail business, there's a lot of stuff going on. And if you have to write everything down, and you'll spend all your life looking to see what you wrote down and where it is. So I would ask that question on a scale of 1 to 10, how good your memory is? Well, it's about a 9. I'd hire them. And then a couple of weeks later, I said, the report I gave you last week, I said, can I have that? And they would say, what report? Well, back then I was 40 years old and my memory was second to none. And it was terrible. So what did I do? The next round of trying to find an admin, I tested 3 candidates. One did not test very well, so she was eliminated. The other 2 candidates both looked great on the testing. I hired one. She was my admin for 8 years until I left, and then she ultimately wound up moving on. The other one, about 2 months later, I called her up. I said, did you ever find a job yet? I said, because I need an admin for a COO that I just hired. And she said, yeah, love to take it. She just retired 2 years ago after working at Party City for 25 years. So having told about my 10 admins in 11 months to these 2 admins that I wound up hiring, if that doesn't say something, I don't know what would.
Interesting. I've not heard that before. That's really fascinating. So you pay attention to the culture, and did you have clarity about what kind of culture you wanted at Party City?
Probably not. I'm a pretty direct, say what's on my mind type of an individual. I think I'm pretty, I don't want to say tough, but I'm demanding, and that's probably a better word than tough. And I've had over the years a couple of great VPs of HR, and they used to tell me, they said, Steve, you can get away with a lot of stuff because you have the Mandell charm. And
Love that.
And I know how to treat people. And at the end of the day, I know that I have to be, if I walked hypothetically into another business, if I walked into a warehouse, I joked with all there could be a couple hundred people working there. I just dealt with them at a different level. I don't want to say I was human, but maybe that's a way of describing. But I cared, and I cared who they are. I cared if they were sick or one of their family members is sick. That was a culture of really caring about the people that work with me. So, and that has been a strength.
I love that. And so here we are as we're speaking, it's 2025. And as I look at, all this evidence that life is not well in many of our workplaces, right? I mean, Gen Z people are turning down promotions. They don't want to step up and be in charge of other people. You've got this sort of quiet quitting. You've got people feeling disengaged at work. And somehow in many, many workplaces, we seem to have just lost that human touch.
Yeah, I definitely agree. Definitely agree.
So just back to Party City, because I think from a business point of view, it's really an interesting story about kind of how capitalism works, right? So you're riding a wave, the thing is growing like crazy, the 90s are rolling on, we start to have the internet, and we start to have the sort of massive disruption that digital causes, and the business is doing really, really well, and then you start to get these more financially motivated players involved in the company, and then eventually you ended up leaving, had retiring, although I don't think you actually thought of yourself as retiring. But maybe talk a little bit about, as a founder, as somebody who's personally really identified with the company, all your franchisees, that whole community, and now you're bumping up against people like private equity players. How does all that play out?
Well, in all fairness, when I left the company back in 1999, we were flying real high. We had in 1998, we had opened up approximately 80 stores that year. They were the best class of stores that we've ever had. And because we typically opened up stores right before Halloween, August or September, I could always tell based upon the store's performance in October, as to how good they were going to do for the full year, the following year. And I knew that we were going to have a home run in 1999 based upon the performance of these 80 new stores. And it was going to be our year and all that type of good stuff. Well, unfortunately, sometime in February of 1999, I got a call from my attorney, who was also on our board, saying, "Steve, we have a problem. We're having a problem getting our audit done." And to make a long story short, our auditors, Deloitte and Touche, and my chief financial officer, and to make a long story short, we couldn't get an audit done. And when you can't get an audit done, you have a big problem, because we were public. By the way, if we were a privately owned company, we had no problem, right? And so that was the beginning of the end for me personally, because it was on my watch. So although we were a hot company, we had to announce, because we were public, that we were in violation of covenants, on bank covenants, and to the financial community. Our vendors were very nervous that our banks would pull our $60 million credit line. They stopped shipping us. So these beautiful stores, where I would go crazy if one item was out of stock, looked like they were going out of business, and they were. And I guess the bottom line to it is that somebody came along. It wasn't somebody. He happened to be somebody that the Craigs knew, and their from Jenny Craig, a financial person, and he was able to take the banks out. And I think he probably invested $60 million, and he probably walked out 5 or 6 years later with $400 million. And but the bottom line is that I left at a time where the company had been a really hot situation. I was not involved with private equity investors. Yes, we were a publicly owned company, and fortunately, along the way when we went public, I had founders of Bed Bath & Beyond kind of spent a day with me walking the stores, because the company that was taking us public wanted an outside board member. They had to have an outside board member, and they gave me some great advice. And the great advice was, he says, don't run the business for Wall Street, run the business and doing the right thing. I'll never forget that. And that's what we did. We didn't spend a lot of money on dressing things up. We spent a lot of money on driving the business and making customers happy. So that's kind of what happened. I was out. The model was so good that even though they had many different CEOs, nobody could kill that model. It took a lot of work to kill the model, and so that's basically what happened. And fortunately, we weren't dependent upon major venture capital folks coming in. But I do think that was one of the problems, because they came in, they invested money, they proceeded to leverage the company and place it in heavy debt, take their money out, and subsequently the debt was so heavy that the company just couldn't handle that. And of course, the other combination is that they just lost focus on the customer and doing what you need to do to make the customer happy. And they did dress it up in many ways. Like I said, the picture wall thing of the past. The fact that customers would walk up and down the aisles and just fill up that shopping cart with product they didn't even know existed. Well, the folks that came in wound up having a different attitude of making it a boutique type look, taking away the value proposition, and that was the beginning to the end.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I've heard you mention the original value proposition was very economical. So it wasn't an expensive store. It was it really had a value proposition around creating great experiences, but at a really affordable price. And then this incredible selection and surprise and the costume wall and things you couldn't find anywhere else. I mean, that sort of combination of magic. If I think about it, I've looked into Toys R Us quite a bit, and you had a similar idea there, right? So the founder there was, hey, I want to make these things. I mean, they were the original, stack it high and watch it fly store, right? And then you had the private equity people coming in and basically treating it, much more like an investment vehicle than like a human vehicle, I guess I would say. And I think
doesn't always work, does it?
I'm sorry?
I said it doesn't always work out very, very well.
No, not in retail for sure. And we've seen this so many times. I mean, Fairway here in New York, Toys R Us for sure. So many of the other stores. And I kind of wonder if we've sort of got that recipe wrong. I think in many cases it demonstrated that we do. Because what I see in private equity a lot is that for a while it works. But that drumbeat of debt can just cause so many decisions to get made that are not really in the customer's best interest.
Yeah, for sure.
So then I got to think that were a rough few months. But as you've said, you were thinking about the future, and you went into a business doing internet costumes. Is that right? That was
so. Yeah. Somehow, by the way, I was the person that. A long time ago, one of my friends said, well, why don't you sell on the internet when I was in Party City? I said, who would want to buy anything on the internet? Party supplies on the internet shows you how smart I am, right? And my vision, right, of saying nobody would. Anyhow, I decided, I was going to get into the costume business with one of my friends. And I just said to myself, well, if I'm going to get into this space, and there were obviously other people already there, what was I going to do different? It's like just to be a me too, for me, just doesn't work. And so I was trying to figure out what could I do different. The first thing I just did unrelated was the industry had changed. This was about X amount of years later. And one of the ways it changed is that sexy costumes in the Party City era consisted of two products: a sexy devil and a sexy witch. So the market had changed because sexy costumes were a big deal, and the sexy costume manufacturers were really people that came out of the lingerie business, and they were out on the West Coast, and I had no relationship with them. I said, you know what, I really should go out there and speak to them, and introduce myself, which I did. And I was at one of the companies, and I said, you have any suggestions? What can I do different? And what has anybody done in the area that I may want to take a look at? And they mentioned a lingerie online retailer. They said, they're doing great. And I took one look at what they were doing online. I said, oh my God, that is it. I actually rushed out of the office. I called my advertising company. I said, I found what we're going to do. And they presented it online completely different. You may remember a lot of companies show like little thumbnail sketches online. You see what costume you like, you click on it, and well, if you don't like it when it blows up, you go come back. Anyhow, we showed large pictures of every costume, and although it wasn't what they call best practices, I think that's what allowed us to really get into business and be different. And we hit the ground running and doing a lot of business on the online costume business. And it was a lot of fun. We grew from, I had a little bit of space in one of my vendors' warehouses, and we probably had 4,000 square feet of space. And we actually, the second year, we took our own space. It was about 30,000 square feet, moving forward over a couple moves, we wound up with 90,000 square feet. So it was just a great experience of giving the customer what she wants, showing it to her how she wanted to look at it, and the only so we grew it from $0 to $40 million in probably 5-6 years, and the only reason why I wound up getting out of that is that you may remember the famous Hurricane Sandy that dumped a bunch of water in New Jersey. I didn't realize that on the other side of the woods was Raritan, I don't know what it's called, Raritan River, what it was called, but my building wound up, my 90,000 square foot warehouse was 4 feet underwater.
Oh, no.
And I said, you know what, after this, I had enough. I sold the business to my partners, and I moved on. So that's kind of what the online costume business was about. We did buy one of the original online party goods companies. It's called Birthday in a Box, and we wound up buying that, and it was a great combination, because with the costume business, although it's an all year round business, 75% of it's done in 2 months. And having bought the party goods business, it allowed us to grow our infrastructure all year, and it really made a big difference.
So when you if you think about your mental model for looking at opportunities, one of the things that my research on habitual entrepreneurs, people that start them, is it's like they've got an inventory of ideas in their heads, right? Pick up signals, look around the world, say, oh, there's an unmet need, or, oh, somebody must pay to have that problem solved. But they don't act on it right away. Right? It's just like it's in inventory, like this whole idea inventory. And then what I've observed is with others, and I love your reflection on this, is something comes together that says, okay, that idea, I'm going to take that off the shelf, and now I'm going to do something about it. Do you have a conscious process for doing that, or is it more just the pieces make sense to me, and now it's time to go?
I'm pretty impulsive, and I see something. I said, that looks great. And, the only issues, for example, I have today, my wife will kill me, because I turned 80 a few months ago, and I need about another 20 years because I have so many ideas, even in my present business, of things that I would love to do, things that to me are no-brainers. But yeah, I have a laundry list of stuff in my head, and I wish I was at a position where I could really take full advantage of them. But I'm too impulsive to put something on and say, I'll do it in 5 years. That is not me. To this day, I say to people, I don't have a 5-year plan. I have a plan of what I'm doing now.
So let's talk about Incredible Cookies, because the website looks awesome, but it's online only, right?
Yeah, it's strictly online, although we happen to be in a small strip shopping center. The landlord wasn't too happy that we were an online business, and we just enlarged we doubled the size of our space. We were only there for less than a year and just outgrew it. And part of the deal of allowing us to do it is that we were going to do some retailing. So we're not going to be a real retailing. I shouldn't say real retailing. But we're doing it very, very different. You'll appreciate this, I think. We're doing a cookie wall, a custom cookie wall. And guess where it was modeled after? It was modeled after our Party City picture wall. And we actually just set it up last week. We didn't open the doors yet, but but primarily we're an online company. That's what we're all about. We ship nationwide. The other thing that I recognize after speaking to customers, the importance of getting product out yesterday. It's certainly not in 2 weeks from now, because people always wait till they just do. They wait till the last minute, and so even our ads that we have on Google or Bing come about by speaking to the customer and asking the customer what made you pick us out versus other people. Mm-hmm. That's been my life.
Well, that business has to be tough logistically, right? I mean, cookies are not like paper napkins. I mean, they must be tricky to ship. They must be tricky to make. And so you have the one that like the personalization is printed right on the cookie, and then you got some which are like a printed layer over the cookie, right?
I could talk, we don't have the time, but I could talk to hours of all the issues and problems about doing personalized cookies that we have, and there are a lot. Probably, although we've been very fortunate, we've looked at all the problems about coming up with great looking product, and even to this day, just as an example, it's one thing for me to say it's great looking product, but that doesn't count a lot because I'm an owner. But what I always tell customers when they call up and they want a quote from us, besides our prices are on the net, but putting that aside, they want a quote. The first thing we say to them is we give them the pricing, and then we say, can we suggest that you go online and look at an independent website called Judge Me Incredible Cookies and read. We had 700 plus reviews from our customers last year alone, and 90% of them are 4- and 5-star rating, and most of them being 5-star, not 4-star. And it's all about the quality that goes along with it. We have spent the last year and a half or two of trying to figure out how to properly ship them. Mm. We've come up with a solution for that. You stay focused and you become relentless to figure out, well, what's the answer? What should we be doing? Can this happen? And speaking to people. And so anyhow, there are definitely issues in the cookie business, personalized cookies, and when I look at product that we're shipping, I tell you, it does my heart well. I'm very serious about that. I said, we're doing that. That looks incredible. It's just, and that's why we've grown so fast in this industry, become the leader in the industry overnight.
One of the things as you're speaking that makes me think of is you're familiar with Mark Laurie, I would imagine. He was So right out of college, he started a business called diapers.com. And the original model was like he was storing diapers in like his sister's garage and driving them up and down the Northeast Seaboard. And eventually it became a really big business. He went on the internet. It became so competitive with Amazon that Amazon eventually relented and bought them for something like $500 million. He and Jeff Bezos came to loggerheads. Eventually he got acquired by Walmart when he started his next business and was really the guy behind Walmart's move into digital. But he said something not too long ago, which the way that you're talking reminds me of. He said, when I'm starting a business, I like to do things that are hard. Because if I do things that are hard, it's really difficult for other people to copy me. And the way that you're talking, it's like you just meet these problems one at a time. And if you solve them, that becomes, a competitive differentiator, and it becomes difficult for others to copy you. And I think that's a really interesting message to bring to other would-be entrepreneurs.
Very, very, so true. I think that's been one of the keys to success is getting involved in industries that there's not a lot of competition. One of the good reasons why there isn't a lot of competition, it's too hard. Right? People don't want to tackle what they have to tackle. It's not like putting merchandise onto the shelf. It is so much. I mean, of all the businesses that I've been in some ways, the custom personalized cookie business is without a doubt the hardest business that I've been in. And that's the good and bad news. We wake up every day saying, what can we do better? And that's where we are with the business.
But it sounds like you like it. It sounds like you really like solving.
No, I don't like. I by the way, just to be clear, I don't like it. I love it.
No, okay.
There's a big difference between liking something and loving something. Okay. It's my passion, and I have three passions, right? My businesses, my wife, and my puppy. Not necessarily in those orders, but you're very passionate. I'm very passionate about things, and that's the driver.
I love that. I absolutely love that. So if you were kind of looking back to your 20-year-old self, are there things that you would advise someone who was 20 or 25 today to be thinking about as they think about? I mean, I'm with you. I think it's hard to sort of map out your life in some grand map, but that never works. I think you always meet twists and turns in the road. But are there a few kind of things that you think maybe young people aren't thinking enough about?
Well, excuse me. One of the things dating, it's about commitment. It's about practicing what you preach. I remember I was a buyer at Pathmark Supermarkets, and way back after I graduated from college, and I basically, I don't want to say I worked 25/8, but I've always worked really, really hard, speaking to people, trying to figure out if there was an opportunity outside of Pathmark Supermarkets. I just don't think that people stay as focused to being relentless to find that key. Also, you can't practice entitlement. You have to create. You have to create your own. You have to be willing to do whatever it takes to be the best at what you're doing. Even when I think back to Party City and I was in my 30s back then, and I traveled the country trying to figure out, well, what was this party good story going to look like? And I wound up, I was a New Jerseyite at that time, and I wound up in Florida, and I saw a retailer, and I said, that's it. And meaning that's it, that the look and feel. I said, I can take this and I could do and make it a lot better. I could take some of the things that they were doing and just take it to the next level. So it's an incredible commitment, whether you're looking to start your own or whether you're looking to grow within a company. There are no free rides. You have to work hard in figuring things out. And I think that's really what what it's all about. Don't say, hey, I want to do this. Okay. I'm willing to do X, Y. You have to do it and not talk about it. So, and that would be my only advice. And that's a tough one. Even when I hire a person who says, I want to grow, I want to do this, I want to do that. I make it really clear that there are no free rides. If you're willing to do what it takes, you'll get there. If you're not willing to do especially if you pass the Mandell test, which are the factors that make a person successful. And so that's kind of would be my advice to people that are relatively young. And to a certain extent, either you have that type of personality or you don't have that type of personality. You can't make people hard workers. You can't make people relentless. A lot of the times it comes about from your genes. If your parents were that way, you become that person. Not all the time, but many times. So I was lucky. I had a dad that worked real hard, and was always working. That became me. So that's kind of hard to learn. You can't teach a person to do that. They either have to have it or not, or not, depending how bad you want something.
Yeah, and what your motivation is, right? And I remember reading. I can't remember where I read it, but that you have 3 guidelines for success in life.
Yeah, my secret formula for success is pretty simple. It's pretty basic. First ingredient is luck. All right, no question about that. Because along the way, if you trace everything I did, there was you could have walked off the right elevator at the right day and met the right person. That's really luck, right? The second ingredient is luck. The third ingredient is you do not get lucky by sitting home at night watching TV. And so you got to be out in the world, okay, seeing what's going on. And that's my formula for success. Luck, and not sitting and watching TV.
I love that.
Except maybe Shark Tank. Maybe Shark Tank. So we come up with some good ideas and figuring out, which I can't go into it right now, but one of the Shark Tank series from many years ago, I'm going to coming out with a very similar line very shortly. A company that did very well. Started on being on Shark Tank, raised some money, and so even watching TV sometimes pays off.
Well, Steve Mandell, what an absolute pleasure to chat to you.
So much.
So appreciate you taking the time. And for all you would-be entrepreneurs out there, this is a life story worth studying. So thank you very much. And I'm really, maybe I'm going to order some of those cookies for my next corporate thing.
Please do. Don't forget to take a look there. Incredible Cookies. You'll love it.
IncredibleCookies.com. Everybody take note.
Thanks so much. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Take
care. Right. Bye-bye.